9 years ago, I got on the plane to come here to the Philippines. How I wish someone had sat me down and warned me before I ever set foot on that airplane. Paul, there are things that you are not going to be prepared for. I wasn't told in the expat forums. I never saw it in the Facebook groups. I never heard it on any YouTube channels. True story. I've been mulling this over for some time now. And I keep wondering, what if somebody that had come before me had sat me down and told me about things that I wasn't prepared for and could warn me about? Maybe it would have made a difference. And then again, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it's just something that one has to learn through experience and living it. This is what nobody ever warned me about. This is definitely not some negative "don't move to the Philippines" video. I'm 71. I moved here when I was 62. My wife, baby May, is still making me breakfast. The rooster next door still wakes me up every morning at 4 a.m. I'm not going anywhere. So let's just take that right off the table. This is also not some kind of financial advice. I don't know you. I only know me. What I want to express are things that I have observed and seen with my own two eyes that I feel guys like myself, when we first arrived here, were simply not prepared for and are very rarely spoken of. Okay, let's get into it. One of the first things that kind of caught me off guard was how, when I moved here to a small community, Dumaguete/Valencia, how I was perceived by the local population. It was a totally different perception than how people perceived me back in my home country. Everyone here looked at me as being wealthy. Now, I think we all know I'm not a wealthy man. I live over here on my Social Security check. That wouldn't even pay the rent, the electricity in America. But over here, the dynamics are completely different. I am wealthy if you compare me to the average Filipino family. And one thing that I had to really adjust to, and took some time, and I was not prepared or warned about this, was how to be generous without being run over and used. How to say no without blowing up an entire relationship, either with friends, other expats, locals, females, vendors, etc. It's a different dynamic. It is not the same community here that I grew up in America. The social dynamics are completely different. And so as a person, the knee-jerk reaction is to kind of puff your chest out because it feels good. You got this ego, it's like, yeah, for once in my life, I'm the rich guy. It's gonna blow up in your face. It blew up in mine. I allowed that persona to exist for a short period of time until I finally caught on. And when people came up to me and said, "Oh, you're the rich foreigner," I had a comeback for them over time. I said, "No, I'm not a foreigner, folks. I'm a porner." Now, moving here at the age of 62, prior to getting on that plane, I had a full-on examination of my body. And believe it or not, throughout all this intensive exams that they were doing, they ended up putting a stent in my heart. I didn't know I needed it. The doctors didn't know I needed it until they went in and looked. And guess what? I'm glad they did that. But that was 9 years ago. At the age of 62, I didn't have a wide variety of insurance options, but they were not as narrow or damn near closed as they are today at the age of 71. So the question I would ask is this: am I healthy enough to make the trip? And what are my options when I arrive there? Will you have a complete physical? Are you going to have coverage? Because not if, but when something happens, are you and am I, are we going to be prepared to deal with it? Are we going to be able to pay for it? Can we afford it? Nobody told me before I got here how things change those 9 years from 62 to 71. Those healthcare options narrow right down. Food for thought. Here's one that took about 3 or 4 years for me to experience it. And I think you might be a little surprised by what it is. Loneliness. Now, difference between being lonely and experiencing loneliness. I'm not really lonely. I have my beautiful wife. I have a nice circle of friends. I have an interaction with the community. I feel comfortable within myself and within my family that I've made here. However, there are times when I reflect back on my time in America and those relationships and those bonds that I had formed with those people for over 60 years. Now, many of them, unfortunately, have passed on. Almost all of my immediate family is gone except for one cousin. But there were coworkers, there were buddies, there were neighbors, and we shared experiences and stories. We would play golf. We would take our kids to the park. A lot of the coworkers and friends that I was tight with in America prior to coming out here, wow, did I ever hear from them for the first year, year and a half. They were constantly looking at my little Facebook posts that I made of pictures and places and things and people. And they were saying, whoa, Paul, how much does this cost? How do you like it over there? I want to go there. I want to do what you did. When I get older, I'm going to do that too, blah, blah, blah. And I enjoyed that interaction. But you know what? Between the space and the time, pretty soon, those people kind of drop out of my conscience and I've dropped out of theirs. Life goes on. And so they've moved on without me. And that makes me feel a little bit lonely. I get especially lonely at Thanksgiving because there's no such thing as an American Thanksgiving, in my opinion, here in the Philippines. And it's not just the turkey and the stuffing and the cranberries and all that, but it was that special bond that I had with my immediate family. Now, I know they're all gone and we can never recreate that, but it still makes me a bit wistful inside. And I do feel a little lonely when I no longer hear from those friends that were so interested in me the first year or two that I was here. And I'm as guilty as they are. So that is something that I've had to contend with, and it might be something that you experience also. So the last and the biggest thing that took me completely off guard and knocked me on my heels was for the first 5, 6, maybe 7 years that I lived here, I always had this little special teddy bear and this little security blanket that I wrapped around myself because I told myself when I first got here, up to just a few years ago, you know what, Paul, if something goes sideways, the whole thing blows up in your face, or you just want to get out of Dodge, you can always go back home to America. Well, have you run the numbers? I have. And it is no longer doable. In 2016 to 2017 is when I left, grocery prices had gone down. Affordability in America was probably at its, well, I don't want to say it was at its peak, but it was certainly doable. And for years after that, it was fairly stable. And then the pandemic, and I don't have to tell you about home prices, car insurance, home insurance, property taxes, changes, the attitude of the political landscape, all of that kind of stuff. There's no way in hell that I can afford to go back to America, no matter how I slice it. So now it's up to me to make it work out here. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.